Thank you, Provost Orr. Thank you, Regent Island. It is indeed a special pleasure for me today to provide, as I've been asked, some historical context for some of the most important issues currently facing us as educators in regard to the purposes and value of our educational mission at the undergraduate level within the larger framework of our mission as public research universities. In the short history lecture that will follow, and yes, there will be a test, I will try to show that the dominant debates, even today, have been around for quite some time and indeed have been shaping institutions of higher education for well over a century. On a curricular level, Western higher education has in fact roots that are far deeper and go back to the classical thought of ancient Greece. The kinds of classes offered in American universities well into the 19th century were tied to the structured and systematic study of a body of knowledge put forth by great classical philosophers, Socrates, Plato, especially Aristotle. This in fact was the root of the liberal arts. But religion, of course, especially in the U.S. in the 17th, 18th, and early 19th centuries, was critical for the establishment and development of higher education as we know it today. It's evident not only in the role of churches in founding many of the first American colleges, in part to train their clergy, but also in the initial commitment to a moral education as foundational. The classical languages that were introduced to read Scripture, in the first instance, survived the Enlightenment and even the secularization of college education because they were also seen as media for classical debates about citizenship, the public good, and moral subjects. This broad classical inheritance was translated by the Founding Fathers into a remit for the new nation. As Yale President Ezra Stiles noted shortly after the Revolutionary War was concluded, it is, he said, scarcely possible to enslave a republic where the body of the people are civilians, well instructed in their laws, their rights, and their liberties. Now, most civic and political leaders at this time did not consider it possible to educate everyone. But many did see value in producing what Thomas Jefferson called the natural aristocracy of learning and talent that was not tied to a specific class. Envisioning universities as essential to turning America into a true meritocracy, Jefferson also, in fact, developed the first notion of university education as a means of achieving social mobility. In founding the University of Virginia in 1819, he created the first publicly supported college dedicated to educating leaders in practical affairs and public service rather than for either the pulpit or, for that matter, the professions. It was also the first non-sectarian university in the United States. But as American society became steadily more industrial, new practical and vocational interests came to the fore. Theoretical science, which was present in the curriculum through natural philosophy and physics, began to include navigation, engineering, mechanics, and increasingly agriculture. The study of classical languages began to give way to the study of modern languages, French and German in particular. On July 2nd, 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Land Grant Act, giving each state 30,000 acres of federal land for each representative and senator sent to Congress to be used to establish an endowment to support, I quote, at least one college where the leading object shall be, without excluding other scientific and classical studies, to teach such branches of learning as are related to agriculture and the mechanical arts. Morrell's ambition was in some ways monumental. For in envisioning a comprehensive system of colleges for the industrial classes, accessible to all but especially to the sons of toil, as he put it, he elevated the practical vocations, agriculture and mechanical arts, to the same social standing as that which accompanied the liberal arts and sciences. Well, relative inclusiveness set the land-grant institutions apart from their private cousins to the east, underscored by the fact that most were co-educational. The University of California, which admitted women by 1870, just a year after it opened its doors, 2 years I think, it enrolled enough women to make up 40% of the student body by 1894. The main debates of the time, however, concerned not the makeup of the student body so much as the focus of the curriculum. Originally, lawmakers had opted to create an agricultural, mining, and mechanical arts college, but instead they decided to build a comprehensive university. First in 1872, when Daniel Coit Gilman joined the budding institution as president. Recruited from Yale's scientific school, Gilman vowed to bring a more modern conception to the University of California, where it would be adapted to the state's public and private schools, to its peculiar geographical position, to the requirements of its new society, and its underdeveloped resources. Very soon after Gilman took the helm of the University of California, however, an agriculture professor mobilized the agricultural interests in California to condemn the university for neglecting the study of farming. He procured support from the state legislature, which conducted a formal investigation into the management of the university and the Board of Regents. While the university and its administration were exonerated, the ordeal unfortunately led to Gilman's departure to lead Johns Hopkins University back in Baltimore. But the battle continued. Bills were introduced to alter the governance of the university, And yet, public distrust of the university was fanned by a virulent economic depression at the time. But in a constitutional convention in 1878, the university achieved a resounding victory by obtaining autonomy from direct political management and being named a public trust, and I quote from the amendment, entirely independent of all political and sectarian influence, and kept free therefrom in the appointment of its regents and in the administration of its affairs. The University of California continued its commitment to practical as well as general education, not just in engineering and agriculture, but as of 1898, in commerce as well. As President Wheeler noted in an address to the Merchants Association in San Francisco in 1899, I quote, "The day is past when the university existed to train men solely in a certain narrow list of vocations, either for lives of leisure as gentlemen's sons, or to professions such as the ministry, the law, medicine, and teachers. The modern university," he said, "has to do with all that concerns life and the interests of life." Henry Tappan, the first president of the University of Michigan, defined universities in the late 19th century as cyclopedias of education, wherein libraries, cabinets, apparatus, and professors, provision is made for studying every branch of knowledge in full, for carrying forward all scientific investigation, in the lofty enthusiasm of growing knowledge and ripening scholarship. This vision of an ever more comprehensive university, founded in research activity, was thereafter seen as foundational for both public and private universities, led in particular by the Universities of Michigan, by Johns Hopkins, by the University of Chicago, and increasingly, of course, by the University of California. Now, this new development had important impact on undergraduate education. As the research foci of the university expanded, the variety of classes and specialized areas of study increased greatly. The formation of academic societies and the hiring of specialist faculty led to the proliferation of fields of study. Universities hired professors of Sanskrit, Arabic, Chinese. They developed new fields in social science that began to address concrete social issues, including prison reform, poor relief, crime, and social deviance. At the same time, the pillars of the traditional undergraduate education began to be replaced by curricula based on individual academic disciplines and increased student choice. Now, although the University of Virginia had led the way in allowing students some degree of choice, the idea of the specialized focus of the major, especially organized around academic disciplines, only developed late in the 19th century. In fact, the first formal use of the term major for undergraduate degrees was at Johns Hopkins, which was also the first German-style research university. At Cornell and at Harvard, new elective systems granted students the freedom increasingly to explore more personalized courses of study in the last 2 decades of the 19th century. President Eliot of Harvard organized courses by department, number, and instructor, and opened them all to qualified students regardless of the year, championing what he called in 1894 a spontaneous diversity of choice. And in 1905, the University of California followed suit, divided the curriculum into a lower and an upper division, creating a framework for liberal study in the first 2 years of education, and increased specialization in the latter 2, introducing the major as the organizing principle in those years, immediately after 1905. Since then, the idea that undergraduate learning should include general education as well as specialization, typically in the form of a major, has been a distinguishing feature of American higher education across the board. Around the same time, the collegiate experience also became an integral part of higher education. This included activities outside of the classroom, inspired in part by Teddy Roosevelt's call for the strenuous life. Athletics, especially football for Roosevelt, and many other activities were added to the remit of colleges in rounding out what was called the extra curriculum. The university's new focus on organizing these elements of the life of collegians underscored a broader sense of what the mission was, and it was, of course, a mission, too, to mature and socialize young people into full adults. As the 20th century rolled on, the influence and importance of universities expanded, not just for the elite, but for the growing middle class. With this came steadily increasing demand, as universities began to see value in supporting students before entry to college so that they could succeed once enrolled. For centuries, colleges admitted all students who met entry requirements or passed an entry exam. But in the early 20th century, the University of California and other schools began to set standards for college preparatory courses. University faculty began to visit high schools and review their curricula. They defined specific courses of study that would prepare students for college, and they began creating benchmarks for accreditation, soon taken up by professional accreditation organizations. In 1907, and at the urging of University of California President Benjamin Ida Wheeler, the California legislature passed the nation's first bill to establish local junior colleges as extensions of high school. This set the stage for what, in fact, of course, became the idea enshrined in the master plan, but installed in 3 different tiers of functionally differentiated institutions of higher education as early as 1920. The President's Commission on Higher Education, convened during World War II, reported out in 1947 that every American should be enabled and encouraged to carry his education, formal and informal, as far as his native capacities permit. This promise of universal access to higher education as a right was made explicit in acts like the GI Bill of 1944, perhaps the most underrated piece of social legislation in the 20th century. Now, of course, as is well known here, the California Master Plan for Higher Education in 1960 devised a formal interworking system for post-secondary education that gave specific roles to the three tiers just described. It also associated a general commitment to the liberal arts with the research work of the top tier of research universities, while accommodating and serving a rapidly increasing population in need of new skills and advanced training across a multitude of fields. President Clark Kerr argued that knowledge produced at universities had become the main fuel for the growth of the nation. The students accused him during the 1960s of championing the corporatization of the university. Kerr also, or in particular, I think, was describing a new reality about which he had great optimism, but also abiding concerns. Although he believed that the university would lead the way to new economic possibilities, he worried that it risked becoming a knowledge factory, whose neglect of students through large classes, the overuse of teaching assistants, and the selection of faculty members based on their research expertise could neglect and even alienate an undergraduate student body. So much has been done over the past 50 years, over the subsequent 50 years, across the University of California, among many other institutions, to address these kinds of concerns, which Kerr was visionary in articulating, but were generally shared, I think, across many large research universities. And, of course, we have only to point to the visionary college systems in San Diego and Santa Cruz, to the investment across the system of huge resources on all of our campuses in student support, advising, housing, career counseling, and planning, and perhaps most importantly, the emphasis on undergraduate teaching. But we are, in fact, also at the forefront of efforts to redefine and re-articulate the centrality of undergraduate education, not just for our teaching mission, but also for the other domains in which we excel, namely in our research and in our public mission. And you'll be hearing from my colleague in just a moment about the further efforts in which we are engaged at Berkeley in this regard. The purpose of an undergraduate degree at the University of California is to combine, in many ways, the best of what is available in liberal arts education with the resources of a great research university, offering courses that cover an almost unimaginable range of opportunities for specialization in research and in selected professional fields, analyze primary texts and data with independent rigor and judgment, and assume that one of our primary obligations is to cultivate intellectual curiosity, not just to train our basic intellectual capacities to evaluate different ways of understanding and interpreting the world, but also to stimulate students to search relentlessly for new ways and approaches to acquire and advance knowledge. We teach undergraduates not just so that they learn, but so that they learn how to learn, and then in turn to teach. Increasingly, this means learning data numeracy as well as literacy, worldly understanding as well as civic values, new skills across a variety of fields for a new world. As we build a steadily proliferating architecture of academic offerings in our majors and specialized programs, we always seek to balance the need to learn about subjects in sufficient depth to be prepared for graduate and professional education with the expectation that students will be prepared in their undergraduate education for careers across a multitude of fields. We also balance courses and training in the foundational principles of discrete disciplines with a range of applications that have robust practical implications. Faculties struggle to build curricular paths, moving students from general to specialized knowledge in ways that can accommodate both wildly uneven levels of high school or community college preparation and the increasing technical challenges of almost every field. We do so in the context of supporting a diverse student body as each student moves towards shared goals of personal maturity and social responsibility, with a continued commitment to extracurricular as well as curricular means for achieving these goals. Today, students face difficult, if also exciting prospects, not just in an economy where jobs are shrinking and changing at a faster pace than ever before, but in a world that challenges our inherited values around social justice, environmental responsibility, and cultural, not to mention economic, entitlement. We know that our students will minimally have an average of six kinds of jobs across their careers, and that they will confront new challenges in a world defined by massive technological change and unprecedented global levels of interdependence. We take up these responsibilities, especially for our undergraduates, in the context, therefore, of a compact in which we embrace change and innovation, while also, and the governor spoke to this just a few minutes ago, while also holding on to some foundational traditions and values that have been for years a critical feature of the unique accomplishment that our university system represents. We take enormous pride in the fact that American universities are, for these reasons, still the envy of the world, and that the University of California has a place of special distinction among all of our peers.